with the Saudis, what if we were to ask you to build a port and an airport and a water desalination plant and an electrical grid? And they said, yeah, we would do it in Gaza. And then we went to the Israelis, and the Israelis said, absolutely.
This whole peace deal that just went down,
Yeah.
which is tenuous.
Yeah, it's not a peace deal.
It's not a peace deal.
No,
Why do you say that?
it's just a ceasefire. It doesn't address a single one of the core issues. Not a single one. You know, stop shooting is not a peace deal.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you see, like, I am rooting for it. I'm rooting for, so, and obviously there's been some now, like, they're fighting over what dead bodies look like when they got like fucking exchanged and all that.
Right.
And there's been some funny business going on both sides. But
Right.
like I said, I'm rooting for a ceasefire to continue.
Me too.
And I will commend, even if I don't like the leadership of both sides, which I don't, I will commend the people for at least trying to do that.
See, that's exactly my position.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you have faith that something like this could be sustainable, though?
Not with the current Israeli government in place. No, it's the most extreme right-wing government in the history of Israel, to the point where the Minister of Finance, who oddly...
Smotrich.
Yes, Smotrich, oddly also has jurisdiction over the West Bank. And Itamar Ben-Gvir, the Minister of, what's his title now? National Security, I guess it is. They both have felony convictions for anti-Muslim hate crimes. Felony convictions for hate crimes, not for, you know, failing to fill out an internet form or something like that, like we have here. And they're in charge of the Palestinians. So as long as those guys are in place, there's no possible way that there can be a lasting peace. And listen, the bottom line too is there's going to have to be an independent Palestine. There just has to be, because the current situation is untenable. Yeah. The Israeli press has been talking a lot over the last several weeks, maybe over the last month, about an idea where Israel would technically continue to own Gaza, but the day-to-day life of Gaza would be administered by Saudi Arabia, which would also then invest in things like an electrical grid, water desalination plants, a port. Yeah, and it would have to be disarmed. There would have to be no Palestinian military. Great, right? It's a great idea. And I've said it a couple of times in podcasts. In 1991, I was on my very first overseas tour in Saudi Arabia, brand new CIA officer.
Hey guys, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge help. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the show.
And I was working for an ambassador who really became legendary, Chas Freeman. He went on to be ambassador to China and assistant secretary of defense. The guy is brilliant. He floated the idea with the Saudis. What if we were to ask you to build a port and an airport and a water desalination plant and an electrical grid? And they said, yeah, we would do it in Gaza. And then we went to the Israelis, and the Israelis said, absolutely never. That was 1991. Mm. And before October 7th, they only had but 5 hours of water every day. Then the Israelis would shut it off. They would have a few hours of electricity. Then the Israelis would shut it off. The situation's untenable, because another October 7th is going to happen if there's not a sort of a pressure release valve, you know? What was it Martin Luther King said? Never underestimate a man's desire to be free.
Yeah.
Well, they've got to concede something.
I've actually never thought about not what you just said, but like an idea I'm getting from that. And I'm just thinking about this live and out loud. So this might be the dumbest thing I've ever said, or it could be like something that's worth kicking around. What obviously Palestinians and Saudi Arabians are different.
Sure.
They're different groups of people.
Yeah.
But they're both a part of the Arab population, if you will.
Correct.
What if like a two-state solution involved Palestine becoming a part of Saudi Arabia?
Off the top of my head, my guess is the Saudis would find that workable. and the Israelis wouldn't.
The Saudis and Israelis are starting to get somewhat along now.
Yes, but we should also not underestimate the Israelis' desire for a biblical greater Israel.
Yes.
And to give away land is not in the Israeli playbook.
And that's the problem here, because you saw the day after the ceasefire, Hamas started executing people in the streets because they're a terrorist group, and that's what they do. They're evil, and they're going to do stuff like that. They exist because there's a vacuum in a place that's not allowed to have a military, not allowed to have a state-run government, not allowed to economically vie for itself. It's locked basically on all four borders. We've gone through that ad nauseum before, you and I on podcasts. What do you expect there to be?
Exactly. Exactly right. And it's even more complicated than that. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, right? We put together one of the greatest, albeit temporary, military alliances since the Second World War. And we went to the Palestinians and said, you better be on the right side of this thing, right? We also said the same thing. At the time, the United Nations Security Council happened to include Cuba and Yemen as two of the states. So we weren't sure what they were going to do, which way they were going to vote. It didn't matter because they didn't have veto power anyway, but we wanted as united an international front as we could come up with. And we went to the Palestinians all the way to the top, to Yasser Arafat, and said, you better be on the right side of this. And they jumped in with Saddam Hussein. The thing is half the population of Kuwait was Palestinian. And Bahrain and Qatar and the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. Well, Saudi Arabia was half the population was Yemeni. And so when Arafat took a position, first, Saudi Arabia expelled literally every Yemeni. I flew into Yemen as that was happening in very early, it was like February or March of 1991. I flew from Jeddah, and as you're coming into Sana'a, I mean, for 15 minutes before you get to the airport, all you could see were people living in cardboard boxes or tin, lean-tos and shanties. They had expelled half the population of Yemen back into Yemen, where there was no food and no water, no work in the first place. I was in Kuwait. I've mentioned before, on Liberation Day, we went in with the Marines, and a senior Kuwaiti prince told me, and I reported it at the embassy team meeting, the ambassador, I still remember the ambassador just shaking his head like, oh my God. The senior Kuwaiti prince told me, in a year, there will be no Palestinians in Kuwait. None.
What was his reasoning?
They had sided with the Iraqis. They were all traitors, and they had to pay for it. So the problem with that is the Palestinians are the middle class of the Middle East. They're the professors, the doctors, the lawyers, the engineers, the public school teachers. They're the ones that make the economy run. You want Palestinians. They're all educated. You want them in your country until their leadership turns on you. And so they started replacing them with Filipinos and Thais and Pakistanis, lots of Egyptians, because the Egyptians are well educated too. So you have lots of Egyptian engineers. All the pilots at Gulf Air, for example, Kuwait Airways, were all Egyptians after that. And the Palestinians were left out on their ears. Where do you go? You can't go back to your country because you have no country. So what do? It was the stupidest decision that Yasser Arafat ever made in his life. Like, this was an easy win, That's what I'm saying. These are the types of leaders that they've had over the last 75 plus years who are these upstart black hand organizations, not run by the best people at all, And that's the thing. Like, when the Israelis will say like, oh, Yasser Arafat was a terrorist, you could disagree with them. They have a case there. Sure. And so was Menachem Begin.
Yeah.
And you can move on from that and win the Nobel Peace Prize for what that's worth. I'm sorry. Two other issues that make this more complicated. Egypt. Okay. The Palestinians desperately want the Rafah border crossing open. Okay. The Egyptians are not going to open the Rafah border crossing. They're just not.
Why?
Because it'll result in a flood of Palestinians leaving Gaza and entering Egypt. And the Egyptians can barely feed their own people or provide work for their own people. They're like 120 million Egyptians. And what, they're going to have to worry about another 2 million Palestinians and feed and clothe and employ them? They can't do it.
Right.
They just can't do it. The other one is Jordan. Most people now are too young to remember that in 1968, the Jordanian military was literally fighting the Palestinians on the steps of the palace as Black September, the Palestinian group, was trying to murder King Hussein and his family and take over Jordan and make it Palestine.
Yep.
Well, they have long memories in Jordan. Yeah, half the population is Palestinian because they're the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren of 1948 refugees.
So is half the royal couple.
And so is half the royal couple. Absolutely true. But the thing is, they'll never be fully Jordanian. In fact, Jordanians carry a green passport, and if you're Palestinian born in Jordan, you carry a black passport. So you don't even get first-class rights. So it's very complicated. Like, people say the right things. Governments in the Middle East say the right things about Palestinians, but when it comes time to put their money where their mouths are, not a whole lot gets done.
So putting Jordan aside for a second, because there's another layer there that maybe we can come back to that you and I have talked about before. One argument that the Israelis have made over the years that I think really does have some weight to it is that a lot of the Middle East and the Arab countries don't really give a shit about the Palestinians. They're just a useful, tool of propaganda.
That's right.
To be able to say, oh, look what the Israelis are doing, but they don't really care about the people. And I would argue, even today, even after the last 2 years and what we've seen, in some cases, I think they're right about that.
I think so too. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Abraham Accords have been so popular and so well received around the Middle East.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.